The wind screamed around Outpost K-14 like a living creature, pushing ice against the metal tower until the walls shook. Inside, the old comm station felt half dead. Lights flickered. Loose wires buzzed. Frost curled across the floor like tiny ghosts. Jace Thorne, the only human left in this frozen sector, worked beside a broken power conduit. His breath showed in the air as white smoke. He wore a heavy coat covered in old mission patches, and his fingers were numb even inside his gloves. The tower had once connected 10 planets. Now it was nothing but a grave of forgotten machines. Jace stayed because someone had to save the last pieces of old culture before the AI system wiped everything clean. And because being alone was easier than watching more things die. A sharp spark snapped from the conduit. Not again, Jace muttered, pulling his hand away. The power was dropping again. If the temperature fell any lower, even he might not make it through the night. He stood to check the heating panel. Thud. He froze. The sound came from below. Not the wind. Not shifting ice. It was steady. Deliberate. A fist hitting metal. Thud. 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 Jace grabbed the metal baton he kept by the stairs. His heartbeat thumped in his ears as he moved toward the lower hatch. No one had visited this tower in months. No human could survive that storm outside. No machine would knock. Another impact shook the door. He reached the small window beside the hatch and wiped the frost away. At first, nothing. Just a blur of white snow and swirling ice. Then a movement. A slumped shape pressed against the frame. Skin pale green. Jace's stomach dropped. Someone was out there. Alive. Barely. He hit the manual release. The outer hatch screeched open, letting in a shock of freezing air so cold it burned his face. The figure collapsed forward into his arms. A woman. Not human. Her skin was icy green with faint glowing lines. Her feet were bare, torn, bleeding. Her clothes were shredded ceremonial fabric, soaked and stuck to her body like wet paper. She tried to speak, but her voice shook too hard to form words. Then, with everything she had left, she forced out one sentence. One desperate plea. Human, what do I have to do to bond with you tonight? Please let me in. Her eyes stared into his with fear, confusion, and pure survival instinct. Jace didn't answer. He didn't negotiate. He didn't ask questions. He simply lifted her into his arms and carried her inside, sealing the hatch behind them. She weighed almost nothing. Her skin felt like ice. Her breath was weak and scattered. He lowered her near the emergency heater, wrapped his coat around her shoulders, and covered her with a foil blanket. Her teeth clattered so violently, he feared she might break them. Her glowing symbols flickered like dying candles. Jace worked quickly, bandaging her hands, checking her feet, trying to get heat back into her body. She watched him through half-open eyes, confused, almost shocked that he wasn't demanding anything from her. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the tower warmed just enough for life to return. And for the first time in months, Jace wasn't alone. But he had no idea that letting her in was only the beginning. Because the old satellites in orbit had already noticed the sudden heat spike inside the dead tower. And they were watching. For a long moment, the only sound in the tower was the crackle of the tiny heater struggling against the cold. Jace knelt beside the alien woman, watching her chest rise and fall in weak, uneven breaths. Her skin was still icy to the touch, and the glowing lines across her arms flickered like fading lights. He checked her hands first. They were raw, split open, skin torn from crawling across ice. No one should have survived that storm barefoot. He wrapped them carefully with heat tape. The woman opened her eyes slightly. They glowed a soft blue-green, fogged with pain but sharp underneath. She studied him, not sure if he was a threat or a miracle. You didn't take anything, she whispered, confused. Jace blinked. Take what? She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. Most humans only help if there is a price. Her words hit him harder than the cold. He shook his head. You're freezing. That's enough reason. Her body relaxed a little, but her eyes stayed guarded. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, like the question itself was strange. Lyra, she finally said. I'm Jace. She pulled the foil blanket closer around herself. The torn ceremonial cloth beneath it still clung to her shoulders. It was not made for travel. It was not made for storms. It looked like something worn for a ritual, not survival. Jace noticed the faint ink markings on her skin, thin curved lines across her thighs and stomach. They looked like symbols, almost like writing. He didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he went to the ration unit and heated a small drink pouch. It barely warmed, but it was better than nothing. When he offered it, Lyra didn't grab it immediately. She washed his hand first, waiting to see if there was a hidden trick. When she finally took it, her fingers shook so much she spilled some on the blanket. "You walked here?" Jace asked softly. Lyra stared at the floor. "I didn't walk the whole way." A pause. "I crawled most of it." Jace felt his chest tighten. "No one makes it across the ice fields like that," he murmured. "I shouldn't have," she replied quietly. "But I had nowhere else left." Her breath trembled. The light in her markings faded again. Jace checked the wall panel beside them. The room temperature had risen only a little, not enough. He increased the heater output, even though he knew it put the tower at risk. The old satellite system's red heat patterns. Too much warmth in an abandoned structure could draw attention. He glanced at the screen. External scan, thermal spike detected. Biosignature, pending. His stomach dropped. The AI grid was awake. It knew the tower wasn't empty anymore. He turned away from the screen before Lyra saw the alert. She looked up at him suddenly. "You saved me without asking anything," she whispered. "Why?" He didn't have a heroic answer. Just an honest one. "I couldn't let you die." She stared at him for a long time, breath soft, eyes shining with something between disbelief and gratitude. Slowly, the glow in her skin brightened again, just a little. Jace sat a short distance away, giving her space, but ready if she collapsed again. Neither of them spoke for a while. Outside, the storm pounded against the metal walls. Inside, the tower felt warmer than it had in months. But in the shadows behind them, the screen blinked again. "Warning, second scan imminent." Jace's jaw tightened. Lyra had survived the storm. But surviving what was coming next, that might be harder. The storm outside eased by morning, but the cold inside outpost K-14 felt sharper than ever. Jace woke on the floor, back aching, fingers stiff. The heater hummed weakly in the corner, fighting a losing battle against the freezing air. Lyra was still asleep beside it, wrapped in his coat and the foil blanket. Her breathing was slow but steady, no longer shallow or panicked. The faint glow in her markings had returned, soft and alive. For a moment, Jace allowed himself to feel relief. Then the wall screen beeped. A single blue light flashed. Thermal anomaly. Review in progress. Jace's heart thumped. The satellites had scanned the tower again. The system had detected something that didn't belong. He stepped closer to the screen. Biological signature. Unconfirmed. Next sweep. For 12. A countdown. If the next scan picked up a clear living presence inside the abandoned tower, the AI would classify it as a non-compliant occupation. The usual response was a purge cycle, cold, quick, and final. Jace silently cursed under his breath. He turned back toward Lyra, but before he could move, her voice came from the floor. "What's wrong?" She hadn't been asleep. She'd been listening. Jace knelt beside her. "The satellites saw us." Her eyes widened slightly, but her voice stayed calm. "What kind of sweep?" "Thermal. Biodetection next." He hesitated. "If it confirms you're here, they'll target the tower." Lyra pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Not from cold, but from memory." "Of course they will," she murmured. "That is what they always do." She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her legs, but she forced herself upright. "Show me your generator access," she said. Jace blinked. "You know how these systems work?" She nodded weakly. "I work security in Refuge Delta. I handled grid shielding and sensor masking before the AI shut it all down." Jace didn't question her again. He led her to the lower tech deck. Frost covered the pipes like silver vines. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. The generator pulsed with a slow, tired rhythm. Lyra knelt in front of the panel. Her fingers shook, but her eyes were focused. She traced the old wiring like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "You still have manual override lines," she said softly. "Old design, simple, but useful." "Useful how?" "If we cut heat everywhere except one sealed room, the tower will look empty. Just a dying machine with one warm pocket. The scan won't pick us up." Jace frowned. "We'll freeze." "Not if we stay close together," she said. Not as a suggestion, as a fact. She continued examining the circuits. As she worked, Jace finally asked the question he'd been holding since the moment she collapsed at his door. "Why were you in ritual clothing? Why come through a storm like that?" Lyra didn't look up. Her voice was flat. My people were flagged as emotionally unpredictable. That means useless to the AI. Our block was dissolved. Everyone was reassigned or removed. Jace felt his stomach twist. You escaped, he said. No, she whispered. I survived longer than expected. The silence between them echoed heavier than any storm. She connected one final wire. There, she said. I can lower our heat signature by 40%. But we must stay in the same room. No movement outside it. Jace nodded slowly. He admired her. Not because she was alien. Not because she was fragile. But because she'd been treated as disposable. And still fought to live. Then the panel beeped again. Scan inbound, 90 seconds. Lyra stood with difficulty. We need to return to the warm room, she said. Now. Jace helped her up the stairs. Her steps were slow, painful, but steady. As they reached the chamber, the lights dimmed. The heater dropped to half power. The tower went dark and quiet, like a creature holding its breath. Lyra sank to the floor, shivering. Jace sat beside her, wrapping part of the blanket around them both. Outside, the wind roared. Inside, the air felt thin, tight, waiting. The satellites passed overhead, and the tower went perfectly still. Lyra leaned her head against the wall. If the scan fails, she whispered, do you have a place to run? Jace looked at her. No, but I'm not leaving you. For the first time, her eyes softened. The room was freezing. The scan was seconds away. But in that small, dim chamber, something warm began to shift between them. Not survival. Not desperation. Something human. Something real. The tower felt like a giant block of ice. Every breath turned into fog. Every sound echoed too loudly. Jace and Lyra sat close to the heater, wrapped in blankets, waiting for the result of the satellite sweep. The terminal finally blinked. Scan result. Heat trace reduced. BIOS signature inconclusive. Status. Monitoring continues. Jace exhaled in relief, but not for long. Inconclusive meant they weren't safe. It meant the AI grid hadn't seen enough to purge the tower, but it also didn't believe the tower was empty. Another scan would come, and next time, it might be harder to fool. Lyra watched the screen with a calm face, but her hands were shaking under the blanket. How long do we have? She asked. Could be hours. Could be minutes, Jace said. They're trying to confirm if the tower holds life. Lyra looked down, jaw tight. That is what they do. They never trust what they cannot measure. She tried to stand, but her legs were still weak. Jace helped her sit upright, adjusting the coat around her. Her glowing symbols flickered again. Not from cold. From fear she wouldn't admit. Lyra, Jace said quietly. Why were your markings glowing when I found you? Are they dangerous? She shook her head. No. They are old cultural symbols. They used to activate when we bonded with someone emotionally. They were never meant to hurt. She paused. But the AI called them non-standard patterns and labeled us unpredictable. Jace felt a heavy weight in his chest. Everything about her people, rituals, emotions, traditions, had been treated like a virus. He looked at the screen again. Next scan probability, high. He swallowed hard. Lyra noticed. You have an idea? Yes, he said. But it's complicated. Tell me. Jace moved closer, speaking slowly. There's an old system inside this tower. A leftover from early frontier days. It was used to register two people as a pair, travel partners, spouses, bonded workers, anything. If two life signs were registered as one unit, the AI skipped them during purge cycles. Lyra watched him carefully. And this, pairing, what does it require? Jace hesitated. It needs biothermal sync. Shared breathing. Physical closeness. Touch. The system has to think we are emotionally linked. She closed her eyes for a moment, understanding immediately. It mimics a bond. Yes, Jace said softly. Lyra looked away. I already shamed myself once when I reached your door. I don't want to offer my body again just to stay alive. Jace shook his head quickly. Lyra, I'm not asking for that. This isn't about using you. This isn't about your body at all. It's about trust. Real trust. The system measures heart rate, breathing rhythm, nothing more. She opened her eyes, watching him with a strange expression, one mixed with fear, hope, and confusion. And you would do this? She asked. Knowing what it means for my people? Jace nodded. You're alive. That's enough. You don't owe me anything. Silence fell. Not cold silence. Heavy, thoughtful silence. Lyra finally spoke, voice almost a whisper. In my sect, We believe that a true bond was made with the heart first, not the skin. Jace didn't touch her. He waited. Lyra slowly shifted beside him, moving just close enough that their shoulders brushed. The blanket wrapped around them both. Her breath trembled once, then steadied. "You saved me without asking," she whispered. "So, if this is the only way, I choose it." Jace exhaled, not with victory, but relief. She leaned slightly into him. Not much, just enough for warmth to pass between them. He opened the pairing interface on the panel beside them. A soft hum filled the room. Pairs sync initializing, awaiting biosignatures. Lyra placed her hand over his. Her skin was cool, but steady. Jace whispered, "Just breathe with me." She nodded, closing her eyes. The scanner began reading their heartbeats, their warmth, the tiny emotional signals between two living beings sitting inches apart. Outside, the wind screamed again. Above them, cold satellites circled, ready to judge. Inside, for the first time since the tower was abandoned, two lives beat in quiet rhythm. A human and an alien choosing trust over fear. The pairing sequence continued, and the tower held its breath. The pairing scanner hummed softly for several minutes, then faded into silence. Jace didn't move. Lyra didn't either. They sat shoulder to shoulder under the blanket, breathing slow and steady until the light on the console turned orange. Pairs sync. Partial match. Further data required. Audit status. Active, 72 hours. Jace rubbed his forehead. "It wants more proof," he said. 3 days of emotional tracking. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "So the machine will watch us?" "Yes. It will test if our bond is real, or if we're lying." Lyra pulled the blanket tighter. Her voice grew quieter. "Machines always assume we're lying." Jace looked at her, ready to say something comforting, but then the terminal beeped again. Background audit. Personal record cross-check. His stomach turned. Lyra saw his face change. "What is that?" Jace stayed silent too long. She instantly understood. "It's looking at your records." He nodded slowly. "And what will it find?" Jace forced himself to meet her eyes. "Something I wish I could undo." Lyra's expression didn't change, but the glow in her markings dimmed. "Say it," she whispered. Jace swallowed. "Years ago, I worked in data clearance for the Central Archive. One of my tasks was approving cultural classifications. The AI flagged certain traditions as non-standard. I signed off on that file." Lyra stared at him. "What file?" "The one that erased your bonding rituals from the registry," he said softly. "Your people were labeled unpredictable, hard to model, low priority. I never imagined that it would lead to us being marked as disposable," she finished. Jace clenched his jaw. He couldn't deny it. "I didn't know your face back then," he said. "Only a page on a screen." Lyra looked down at her hands, wrapped in bandages. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Do you know what they told us?" she said. "They said humans in the archives decided our emotions were too strange, too messy, not useful." "I'm sorry," Jace whispered. "I didn't understand what my work was feeding into." Lyra raised her head. "I already knew," she said. Jace blinked, shocked. "You did?" "When I saw your access tag at the hatch," she said. "Your name felt familiar. I checked it in my memory. You were on the deletion summary they gave us before everything fell apart." Jace's breath caught. "Then why didn't you tell me?" She stared at him, hurt, tired, but not hateful. "Because the man who signed a file years ago was someone far away," she said. "But the man who covered me with his coat, who did not touch me when I had nothing left, that man was real. And I needed to know which one you truly were." Jace bowed his head. He felt heavier than the cold around them. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "That is not what I'm giving," she answered. She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his again. "I am giving truth," she added softly. "And truth can still build something new." The terminal beeped again. Emotional sync, rising. Pair bond, stabilizing. Lyra blinked in surprise. The system felt that. Jace exhaled a shaky breath. "It measures heart rate, breathing, stress, honesty." Lyra looked at him again. A long, deep look. Not angry, not afraid, just seeing him. "You saved me," she said quietly. "And you admitted what you did. That matters more than you think." She wrapped the blanket around both of them again. "No hesitation this time. Help me survive this audit," she whispered. "Not because I begged at your door, but because we choose to stand together." Jace nodded slowly. "I will." The heater clicked softly. The wind outside shook the tower. Inside, Two difficult truths sat between them, not tearing them apart, but slowly stitching something new. Trust. Fragile but real. And the AI would measure every breath of it. The next morning arrived quietly. Too quietly. No wind. No creaking walls. No shifting ice. Just a heavy silence pressing against the tower from all sides. Jace sat in front of the main terminal, watching the audit timer tick down. Emotional audit, day 3. Final verification in 42 minutes. Lyra moved around the room with slow, steady steps. Her skin glowed faintly again, soft teal, warm at the center, dim along the edges. She no longer looked like a dying traveler. She looked like someone rebuilding herself piece by piece. But there was tension in her shoulders. She could feel the countdown too. Jace finally stood and faced her. We need to prepare. The final sweep checks for stability. Consistency. Real connection. Lyra crossed her arms, not defensive, just thinking. And if we fail? Jace didn't sugarcoat it. If we fail, the tower gets flagged as deceptive occupancy. The AI sends a purge drone. She nodded once, the fear hidden deep behind her calm expression. So, she said slowly, what does the machine expect from us now? Jace pulled up the audit guidelines. It needs one last reading, he said. A signal that our bond isn't forced or fake. It looks for emotional closeness. Not perfect, just real. Lyra gave him a long, searching look. You believe we can do that? He met her eyes without flinching. I do. She stepped toward him until they were only a few inches apart. Her breath mixed with his. Her voice dropped to a quiet, steady tone. You know, she whispered, in my culture, bonds weren't measured by rules or machines. They were measured by what two hearts chose, even when everything else fell apart. Jace's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something warmer. Maybe, he said, that's the part the machine doesn't understand. Lyra exhaled slowly. Then let's give it something real, she said. Not for the system. For us. They sat side by side near the heater, shoulders touching. Jace placed his hand near hers, not grabbing, not demanding, just there, offering warmth. Lyra hesitated, then let her fingers fold gently over his. Her markings glowed slightly brighter. The scanner above them whirred alive. Emotional sync, active. Pulse link, measuring. Lyra rested her head lightly against Jace's shoulder. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, out of choice. Jace's heartbeat slowed. Her breathing steadied. The machine's readings climbed. For a moment, the room felt warm, almost peaceful. But then, alert, audit flag, potential record match. The screen flashed red, stabbing through the quiet. Lyra's eyes snapped open. What does that mean? Jace stared at the warning. It found something in my file. Something it wants to question. Her jaw tightened. The deletion order? He nodded. The machine was about to judge him for a mistake he made years ago. A mistake that helped tear her people apart. Lyra gripped his hand tighter. Look at me, she said. He turned to her. We faced this together. No running. He breathed out slow. No running. The terminal beeped again, louder this time. Final scan initiated, 10 minutes. Lyra shifted closer, placing a hand over his chest. She could feel his heartbeat. Fast. Stressed. Human. Jace, she whispered. The system may question what you signed, but it cannot question what you are choosing now. He closed his fingers around her hand. And something changed. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled them. The tower lights dimmed as the final audit system powered up, preparing to judge two lives that had no business surviving, but dared to anyway. Lyra leaned her forehead against his. Her voice soft, steady. No matter what the machine decides, the bond between us is ours. The system countdown started, and together, they waited. The final scan hit the tower like a silent pulse. No sound, no flash, just a pressure that pushed through the metal walls, through the frozen air, through Jace and Lyra's chests. The heater's orange light flickered. The terminal screen went dark. For a long moment, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Even the wind outside stopped. Jace kept Lyra's hand in his. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. Whatever it decides, she whispered, we face it as one. Jace nodded. As one. Then the terminal blinked. Once. Twice. A blue light appeared. Audit complete. Pair bond verified. Purge request. Cancelled. Status. Unit recognized. Lyra exhaled sharply. Her whole body sagged with relief. The glow in her markings brightened like someone turned a light back on inside her chest. "We did it," she breathed. Jace smiled for the first time in days. A real smile, tired but alive. But the message wasn't finished. New lines scrolled across the screen. "Notice, unit flag removed from disposal list. Tower K, 14, reclassified as habitable module. No further scans scheduled." Lyra stared in disbelief. "They're leaving us alone," she said. "Truly alone." Jace placed a hand over hers. "No more hiding." The tower hummed softly, as if agreeing. Outside, the storm clouds began to drift away. Light, thin, pale sunlight, filtered through cracks in the ceiling for the first time in weeks. Lyra stepped toward it, lifting her hand. The light hit her skin, making her faint bioluminescent lines glow brighter. "It's warm," she whispered. "Not much, but it's warm." Jace watched her. Stronger now. Standing tall again. Alive. He had saved her life. But she had saved something in him too. Something he didn't know was dying. Days passed. Then a week. The tower changed slowly. Lyra repaired insulation using scraps of cloth and foil. Jace cleared ice from blocked vents. They shared meals, stories, and quiet moments as the temperature inside grew a little more stable. The space that once felt like a tomb started to feel lived in. One evening, while soft ash drifted past the shattered window like gentle snow, Lyra sat beside Jace at the heater. She traced a fingertip over the faded symbols on her thigh. "You know," she said quietly, "these markings once meant chosen, trusted, bonded." She looked up at him. "Now they mean something new." Jace met her gaze. "What do they mean now?" She tapped her chest. "Survivor. By choice. Not by fear." A silence settled between them, not empty, but warm. Jace took a slow breath and said, "Lyra, what do you want now? Not what the machine wants. Not what the grid forces. You." She looked around the room, at the heater, the blankets, the makeshift shelves, the tools neatly arranged. Then she looked back at him. "I want to live," she said simply. "And I want to live here. With you." Jace felt something solid anchor inside him. For years he had been alone, surrounded by dead languages and dying machines. Now the tower felt alive again. A soft beep echoed from the console. Jace walked over, expecting another warning. But it was a message he hadn't seen in years. "Incoming signal, archive channel. Source, unknown. Content, cultural recovery request." Jace froze. That shouldn't be possible. Lyra stood beside him. "What is it?" He stared at the message. "A request for restoration. Someone out there wants old cultural files. Someone is rebuilding." Lyra's eyes widened slowly. "Then we are not alone," she whispered. Jace looked at her, the only other living soul he trusted in the whole frozen sector, and felt the spark of something bigger than survival. Hope. Real hope. Lyra placed her hand over his. The message blinked again. Transmission awaiting response. Jace whispered, "Let's answer it together." Lyra nodded, her markings glowing softly. And in that forgotten tower on a dead world, two survivors. A human and a once-erased alien. Reached toward a future that no machine had predicted. A future they would build side by side. Together.